As I said, my name is Kristen Boyson, and I'm the Managing Director for CDA's Agricultural Drought and Climate Office. And I'm managing this exciting new grant, our Agrivoltaics Research and Development Grant. Thanks again for joining for our webinar. We just opened this grant application on Friday, and it's open through the end of the month. So I know it's a quick grant, but hopefully we'll get a lot of great project applications. Please feel free to mute yourself so we don't have any background noise or anything as I go through our slides, but most of this webinar will be any questions and conversations we have with you all, and hopefully you had a chance to review some of the materials in advance. So today we're going to go through the background of this program and grant, very quickly provide some context to CDA's vision. I'll go through the grant guidelines, which is one of the 2 documents we've created. I'll also go through how to apply to this grant and look at the grant application questions, which is the second of the 2 documents. And then I'll open it up for questions and discussion. So feel free as I go to put questions in the chat. I will be monitoring that, but if I don't immediately respond, don't worry, I'll have time at the end to access everybody. So you can use the Zoom chat function. You can also use the Zoom hand raise function. And I'll probably pause at the end of each of these agenda items to answer those questions and reach those people who've raised their virtual hands. Great. Kick it right off. So as I said, this is a brand new grant program that was funded by the state legislature in this last spring and passed in May 2023. It was Senate Bill 23092, which had a couple different components in it. This $500,000 for this grant program was a huge component. It also had funding to do a study on photovoltaics, which is putting solar panels over canals, irrigation districts, or irrigation canals, and ditches and bodies of water. So Department of Natural Resources is going to run that study. And then it also had a little funding for a study on the potential of carbon capture on agricultural lands. How can we use farms and ranches and the soils to best capture carbon and potentially create carbon credits? It also has some edits to the statute that creates my office, the Office of Drought and Climate Resilience. But the bulk of it is around this grant program, and we're very excited that CDA gets to run the program. I will say this program is complementary to our existing Advancing Colorado's Renewable Energy and Energy Efficiency Program. ACRE 3 is the acronym. Many of you probably know this program, and is run by Sam Anderson, who's on the call today. That program supports and provides funding for on-farm renewable energy and energy efficiency programs that can include agrivoltaics and solar projects. But this funding is specific to agrivoltaics research and demonstration and can kind of go beyond that on-farm energy creation. So they're related, but currently separate. Per the bill and the statute now, the projects under this grant have a couple different requirements that they should do. They should help mitigate and prepare for the impacts of climate change or drought, reduce energy costs, provide economic resilience to agricultural producers, minimize the negative impacts of solar energy production on the wide variety of benefits that our working lands provide, and provide other statewide environmental benefits. This is obviously a long laundry list of things, and we don't expect every project to do this 100%. Obviously, you can't use $500,000 and check all these boxes, but we think we can make strides in all of these areas. The bill also provided $500,000 in this fiscal year. So that's the current grant opportunity. The bill was signed in June, I think. And in the beginning of August, I recruited a group of volunteer stakeholders. They're farmers and ranchers. They're people who've been involved in agrivoltaic research, both at Colorado State University, at NCAT, the National Center for Appropriate Technology, and at NREL, the National Renewable Energy Lab, based in Golden. And also nonprofits and NGOs that are involved in farming, ranching, food access, and energy production. So here's the list of our stakeholder committee. Again, this was just volunteer committee, and their job was to be an advisory committee as we at the department created the grant goals and objectives, the grant guidelines, and the application questions. So now I'm going to go into the grant guidelines. I'll pause briefly if anybody has any questions on the context. Great. I'll note, I said at the top, and I'll say again, we're recording this and it will be on the website for access, as will these slides. So I know you can't click these slides now, but you should, you will if you go and access the slides later, and I'll drop the link that's attached, that's linked there in the chat, if anybody wants to follow along on the grant guidelines. The grant guidelines outlines the rules and requirements of the grant, both that are defined in the statute and that we created in as we set up the program. The purpose of the grant is to support innovation and research in the agrivoltaics industry and support agricultural producers and further Colorado's renewable energy transition. We at the Department of Agriculture, obviously our main customer is our farmers and ranchers here in Colorado, and we strive to support them. We also know that Colorado has renewable energy targets, and all of the utilities around the state have to meet certain goals that they've set around renewable energy development. That means a lot of land is going to be converted into solar development, wind development, and other renewable energies. So though we know some land is going to be turned into solar, we hope that this project and others will kind of help us think about how can we create multiple benefits on one piece of land? How can we continue to grow food, continue to graze sheep and cows and livestock, continue to grow vineyards and grapes, as in this photo, while also producing some of that clean energy. We hope our future is not kind of a patchwork of extreme development where everything is paved and solar panels are put on top, but instead can be this synergistic landscape where humans and animals can grow food, and we can capture the energy of the sun and wind. So just a little purpose of the grant. Eligibility. This grant is open to pretty much everybody. Tribal and local governments, colleges and universities, any research organization, utilities, electric cooperatives, rural cooperatives, other energy providers, nonprofits, for-profits, and farmers and ranchers and individuals. Of course, we'll need you to show that you're going to provide benefit to agricultural producers and the state of Colorado through this grant. It can't simply be a for-profit project that you would do anyway, but essentially anyone is eligible to apply. We also have a wide range of eligibility types, project types, that I've kind of categorized into 4 main categories. I recognize some projects might fall into multiple categories, which is great. First type is the construction of agrivoltaic systems or agrivoltaics demonstration projects. Second is the expansion of existing demonstration projects. There's a couple demonstration projects around the state. And if people want to add programming or different research components to those existing demonstrations, that of course is encouraged. Research projects that focus on a specific question about agrivoltaics. And finally, outreach and communication projects that look at communicating the benefits or the barriers to agrivoltaics to stakeholders of a wide variety of types. Perhaps there's a type of project that we haven't thought of, and we'd be happy to see those too. We want this to be as kind of wide-ranging as possible, while still, of course, focused on thinking about agrivoltaics research and demonstration and how we can further the agrivoltaics industry in Colorado. Here's the timeline for the grants. And again, this is all outlined in a table in the grant guidelines. September 29th. Is that right? Yeah, the grant, that's amazing. It was last week, 2 weeks ago already. The grant application opened. Today, of course, is our webinar. Check. October 27th, that's in 4 weeks on Friday, is the grant deadline, and grant applications have to be emailed to me by 5 p.m. Mountain Time. The grant is going to be reviewed by our grant evaluation team, and then that small committee is going to provide recommendations to the Agricultural Commission, which is 13 members appointed by the governor of Colorado, who do a lot of things. But one thing they do is approve grants that come out of my office. So the Commission of Ag will approve the grants at their meeting on November 8th. And then I'm going to work hard to turn those grant contracts around pretty quickly and hopefully get contracts to everyone by the first week of December. This grant is based on the state fiscal year. So we need all funding expended by the end of the grant period, which is the end of the fiscal year, which is June 30th, 2024. I know that is a really tight timeline, and I'll talk about that a little bit later. But it's very important to us that the money has to be spent then, otherwise we lose the money. So it's just one of the quirks of the state of Colorado. And hopefully we have some applications that have good projects lined up and can spend the money very quickly. All right, grant payments. The maximum project amount is $249,000, which if you do your math, that means we're gonna fund at least 3 projects in this program, but probably slightly more than that. Grants are paid on a reimbursement basis. That means when you invoice us, we wanna see receipts and staff time, and other expenses, and we'll reimburse you. And there's no work, you can't get reimbursed for work prior to that grant agreement, that first week of December grant agreement. So even if you find out you've been awarded the grant in November, we can't pay you until, we can't pay for any work until we have that signed contract. We could, in some cases, we could allow for an advance payment of up to 10% of your total grant amount. So hypothetically, say you've been awarded $100,000, you'll reach out to me after your grant is awarded, and I'll work with the contracting team and finance team here at the department to approve a advance payment. So you'd get up to, if you had $100,000 grant award, you'd get up to 10K in advance that you'd have to spend down and provide evidence of that money being spent. And then you could start sending us invoices to being reimbursed for. So hopefully that helps a little bit if folks need a little bit of money to start up, but in general, it'll be a reimbursement basis, and that advance payment is upon approval only. So don't count on it, but it's likely that we can get you that 10% in advance. As I mentioned, the grant period ends June 30th, 2024. I will reiterate that. That is in 7 months after December when you get your money. So it's very quick. You have to invoice all funds. You have to invoice us for all funds by June 30th, meaning that you have to have expended all funds by June 30th. There's a very small chance that extensions may be allowed, but I also will need to get prior approval for that. I'll say advance payments, you're likely to get approval for, and extensions, you're unlikely to get approval for. So though it's in the grant guidelines, the state is pretty strict about the end of fiscal year rule. So really try to, I mean, yeah, we won't fund you if we don't think your project can be completed by the end of June. But if it comes to be May and there seems to be some problems, please reach out to me with as much notice as possible for that extension. Great. Invoicing and reporting. Once you get your award, we would like you to invoice every 1 month or every quarter. So, you know, monthly or quarterly, whatever works best for you. And again, that will come with, we'd like receipts for big payments and like a track of time, labor and time and administrative costs. We'd also like a monthly progress report, which we'll provide a template for, and it will be a pretty short form, but we just want to make sure people are on track and that we can provide any technical assistance we need to as needed. So that progress report will provide a short narrative on progress towards your grant deliverables, budget expended, budget remaining, any like materials you've made that we can brag about, and any additional supporting information. We really like kind of lessons learned and success stories. We also like photos. So if you're doing a research project and have some field day, we'd love to hear and see about it. Again, the monthly report will not be laborious. Finally, the final report is due 8 weeks after the end of the grant agreement. I'm trusting everyone that you'll do this final report, even though you've completed your funding. But as someone who's applied to many grants, the end of a grant can be pretty hectic. So I'm giving you a couple weeks to finish that grant report at the end. It'll just be a summary of the project, what was completed, what outcomes were met, and lessons learned. This number 4 is in the statute, so it is required. We'll need all grantees to report on additional costs, revenue, or benefits from the use of agrivoltaics as compared to traditional photovoltaics. There's some descriptions about what this looks like, and we, the Department of Ag, will provide you guidance on how to do this. If your project doesn't have any cost analyses, say that you're doing a outreach project to, you know, farmers, then you can just state that you didn't do, there was no basis for doing this metric. But we would like to provide the legislature some kind of cost benefit analysis. So we're hoping some projects will be able to come up with this. And again, we'll provide some kind of analysis recommendations. So it's not too hard on your staff. Great. All right. Next is the grant application. Before I get into this, are there any questions on the grant guidelines? Oops. Chad, I see your questions and I'm going to read them aloud.
Okay.
Oh, you feel free to say them aloud. Love that.
Yeah, hopefully this is the right time.
Great.
So for a little background, I am looking at the outreach program and the form of a documentary film to understand the different stakeholders' perspectives, the farmers, the land developers, and such. So for approach, when it comes to measurable outcomes, it seems a lot of the project language is geared towards research and construction projects. I'm wondering if there are other measurable outcomes that y'all would be interested in seeing or learning about besides the megawatt per hour.
Yeah, great question. And like I kind of caveated, if there isn't a cost basis, then you don't need to do that. There's a few things in the grant guidelines around, we want to know like number of people you will have reached out to, kind of like what's your impact. distribution channels, things like that. And then we'll really rely on you to provide what your anticipated outcomes, measurable outcomes are. So there's I kind of break down a couple of things we want to see from each project type, and there are a few things in that outreach and communications bucket. But anything that you provide is kind of what we'll expect you to report on throughout the grant period.
Okay, sweet. And then the second one was with the grants and putting together the budget into the different categories of where the money will be spent. I'm wondering if there's any flexibility to adjust the categories as we get into the project, where the funds are going to go. For example, I just won't know all of the hard costs until I get into the project, because the pre-production project of a film project is the scheduling and the research part of who am I going to interview, where are they located, how many interviews there are, and that's going to determine the travel cost and the production cost to do that part. So I don't know if you have any advice for that, or if I could better explain it.
Yeah, that's I understand the question. Yes, we understand that as a project goes on, some of the budget categories need to be flexible, and that's totally fine. You'll just have to check with me, the project manager, before the grant manager, before you do that. So kind of before you, as you kind of realize, oh, I need to move $10,000 from this line item to this line item, just kind of shoot me a email with some narrative on why, and that's fine. It'll be especially fine if your outcomes stay the same. So that'll be the main thing, is like, make sure that you're still reaching that number of people you said, you're still producing 2 films or 1 film or whatever. When those outcomes start to change is when we'll like have to have a conversation. But yes, you can move budget line items around. But a strong application will have like good justification for the budget you submit. So I expect there'll be some modification of the budget, but hopefully not a huge amount.
Okay, that helps. Thanks. I think that's all I have right now.
Great. Thanks, Chad. Yvonne, I see in the chat you ask if farmers can apply even if they are not a research facility. Yes, farmers can definitely apply if they're not a research facility. You can apply kind of in that construction category. However, this is kind of a research and demonstration program. So we would like to see some kind of, like you said, like understanding of energy saved. And then maybe you could write a blog or an op-ed or something that kind of projects that out into the community so we can all learn from it. We probably won't fund, a singular farmer doing a project on their own that only benefits them. That's kind of more an on-farm energy project. And I would refer you to the Acre 3 program or the federal program REAP. But we'd love farmers to apply to this program as long as there is kind of that like demonstration public good aspect of the project. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, thank you. Can I just add to that a little bit?
Sure.
Could a solar company who works with farmers down here in the San Luis Valley, could they apply for it? And then like they work with like poultry farmers to put solar, and then the chickens run under the poultry, it's like an organic poultry farm, and they run under the solar project. Would that be like, can the solar company do that? And then provide like free then solar panels, because they would put them up as part of this grant to several farmers?
Yeah.
Okay.
That sounds like a great project. And again, we just kind of want to see like, what will the utility do with that information?
Yeah.
And how will the farmers benefit? So, but sure, sounds great.
Great, thank you. Thanks.
Yeah. Sue, your question is next, and you're asking if you can do a crop project, and the crops will be planted but not harvested before. Again, sounds from the brief description like a good kind of project. again, we'd have to kind of see what the outcomes are. Is the outcome like energy saved? Are you going to have some kind of communication or demonstration field days out to the property where you can show folks how you planted, kind of what you learned in terms of equipment needed and that type of thing. But yes, it's fine that the crops would not be harvested until afterwards. We understand this is right in the middle of the planting season or the growing season.
Yes, thank you, because, you know, I have this great project. I think it's a great project, but, you know, I could have the crop planted by June. But of course, you know, our growing season, it'll be fall before we could harvest. So just wanted to verify that that kind of a project would work. And I think we can demonstrate the viability of it for other farmers in our area as well.
Excellent.
Thank you for that.
Cool. Catherine, you have a few questions. Oh, you had it unmuted, but then you hit mute again.
Oh,
Got it.
okay, we good?
Good.
I'm coming from the farmer grower point as well. From agrivoltaics are about growing things under the solar arrays that not only keep the land from degrading, but potentially provide revenue and income for farmers and growers, which is one of the incentives for doing that, for allowing your land to go under the panels. And there's a couple of things that come up for me, similar to what Yvonne was saying. Putting crops in the ground, obviously they're not going to be ready by June 20th or the end of that. But that is part of what this is about. And I realized that that would have to go on afterwards. I think one of the hurdles here is how the money works. Because if you're demonstrating on what's viable, revenue producing, climate mitigating, that is not all going to happen by then. And if you're wanting to pull farmers into this too, coming up with $50,000, $60,000, $100,000 to pay out before you get reimbursed is not going to work. Right. On a level. And so I was thinking about how the money works, and I understand why it's set up like it is, but I might suggest in the long run, it's probably too late for this one, to set up something where the reimbursements or the funding for it goes into a trusteeship or something like that, where it can be pulled out as it's spent, particularly if you're looking at installation costs. Okay, let's get under the panels. Let's try out scenario 1, 2, 3, 4, a dry land one with simple, affordable irrigation. Those kinds of installation costs are going to be in the multiple thousands, which would be out of reach for most farmers on that side. But the whole point is to come up with solutions and things that grow there that address that revenue income for farmers, because, you know, hay and cows don't necessarily provide the revenue they used to. So that would be my one comment about if you're really wanting to address what you're talking about, the way the money's working could be massaged a little to provide more incentives to actual farmers, growers. And I'm glad to help, you know, talk about that if need be. And I could say more, but I'll leave it at that.
Yes, thank you, Catherine. And I really appreciate that feedback. And yeah, I recognize that the reimbursement doesn't work really for individuals. It doesn't work for even small organizations who are trying to install big construction projects. This is kind of the compromise we could come to on our short timeline, but I totally agree. If we're lucky and then we can continue this program and get more funding, I think you're right that we should figure out creative ways to make sure our producers can participate fully. And certainly money's how the reimbursement works is a barrier. The timeline's a barrier. I'm sure there's others we're going to find out about. So I appreciate everyone's patience as we work through
well,
this.
thanks for doing this.
Yeah.
You know, discovery, always you learn things.
I will reiterate, we can kind of do that 10% upfront, which maybe can help soften the blow a little bit. But again, if you're spending $100,000 on solar panels, $10,000 isn't going to help that much. All right. Bill, I see in the comments you have a note about outcomes and getting research outcomes in the short time frame. And I think the answer is yes. Similar to the crops, kind of the initial outcomes or initial results would be great by the end of June. And in your application, please kind of say like by June 2025 or by whatever time we expect to have further types of results. I can also see, because this is a short timeline and could be a relatively small amount of money, that this project might be, this funding might be paired with other types of funding. So if anybody's applying with other funding either lined up or expected to be, please kind of say what outcomes will be provided by our funding, and then how your other types of other sources of funding will further the project.
Thanks, that's a great answer. I just, you know, we'll have that complimentary. REAP has a timeline, and we're hoping to get good word back on a REAP grant submitted.
Oh, great.
But it have a research component, whereas if we could use a grant here to get preliminary results and then project that year beyond, that would be really, I think, very useful.
Great. Yeah. And we at CDA are happy to follow up with folks in a year or two and really think about, okay, what was the longer term impact of this project? We always like to talk about that. Great. Well, I'm going to move us along. Thanks everyone for your great questions. I'm excited to hear people are thinking about this. So next is the grant application. And I just wanted to show you a quick trick. So this link leads to, I'll put it in the chat, this document, hopefully. If someone could click on that and see if they go to the right spot, it should look like this. I see some people joining. That's a good sign. So if you come to this page, it's a Google document that you may or may not be familiar with. And I think I'm the author of the document, so I can edit it, but I think you all probably cannot edit it. But what you can do is go to File and make a copy, which will create a copy that you can edit, or you can download it as a Word document if you prefer to work in Microsoft Word. So if you download it as a Word document, which would be File, Download, Word document, you will then be able to kind of use this document as either as a Word document or as a Google Doc as a template. Are you guys seeing Microsoft Word now instead of my screen or my Google Slides?
Yes.
Great, thanks, Cindy. So you could then use this Word document and just put in your answers to all the questions. So that might make an easy application template for you to use. Hopefully that's helpful and not confusing. So again, that's if you're in this Google Doc for the grant application instructions, you can go to File, make a copy, and that will be a Google document copy, or you can go to File, Download, Microsoft Word, or any of these other things if you prefer to work in Open Document or PDF or whatever. Great. Back to the slides. So I won't walk through all the application questions, but a few key requirements, and then I'll go through the general outline. As I noted, it's due at the end of the month, October 27th, which is a Friday at 5 p.m. I decided to make it not due over Halloween weekend because we all got Halloween things to do. You need to submit it via email to me That's my address there. It's also listed several times in the grant guidelines and application form. And I would like a Word document or a PDF or other standard document types, nothing crazy, please. And I want one document of the application, and then there might be additional things you need to provide, maybe construction quotes, maybe more detailed budget information, and all of that should be included as a zip all together in a zipped folder. So it should be in your email, it should be one Word document and one zipped file with other additional documents. If you don't know how to make a zipped file, call me up or Google it. It's not too hard, I promise. The application is 10 pages maximum, 10 to 12 point font, kind of standard margins, please. But that does not include additional documents or budget tables. Somehow I drew on the screen with that pink Sharpie. I don't know how I did that. And 1 second, let me see if I can clear it. Phew, no one liked that anyway. All right, here are the 6 application sections, and there's more detail in the application form. But generally, we have general information. That's your specific organization or your individual contact information and location. Then a project summary, including a few short sentences about what your project's going to do. And then again, details about where it is, what type of project it is, etc. The approach is the bulk of the application, and that will include your project goals and outcomes. Those outcomes are what we'll ask you to report on throughout the grant period. Your scope of work, how you're going to do the project, if you're going to do a construction project, what the construction plan details, if you're doing a research project, what your hypothesis and your methodology is. If you're doing an outreach project, it'll be what are your deliverables, what's your intended audience, and then importantly, that timeline. Again, we really want to see projects that will be at least have those initial results and will have all money expended by June 30th. The third section is this project details, and we have some specific questions around project impact. Again, that's, will your project go beyond kind of the boundaries of building this solar panel or planting these crops? Like, what is the broader impact for Colorado farmers and ranchers and renewable energy developers? B is innovation. Agrivoltaics generally is a new industry, but we want to see things that provide a different look on the projects, kind of new ideas around how to combine energy and agriculture. And finally, 3, because like I said, we're the Department of Agriculture, our primary customer are farmers and ranchers. So how are producers going to benefit? Either individual producers or generally across the state, providing more information, data, or exhibits to farmers and ranchers so that folks can make good decisions around agrivoltaics. Section 4 is about the budget. We'd like a written narrative as well as a budget table, which, as I said, can be provided separately if it's complicated. We want to see the applicant's general expertise. Have you done similar projects? Have you managed previous grants? Can we trust you with the money we're about to give you? And then there's just kind of a list of reporting requirements and general agreements that will hold you to if you win the award. Again, all of these are gone through in more detail in that grant application doc, which several of you are in, and looks like this. So I mentioned this earlier, but our 4 different types of projects have a few additional documents we're recommending. or we're requiring. Again, this is in the document, but I'll go through it quickly. If you're doing a new construction project, I want the timeline. Every project, I want the timeline, but especially the construction timeline and construction deliverables. Because this is a short timeline, you'll likely already have needed to get contractor quotes and feasibility studies. So if you have those, which I would recommend you do, please include those. And if there's if you're working in conjunction with a utility or plan to put energy back on the grid, please provide any agreement you have with your co-op or utility. For demonstration projects, either new or building upon existing demonstration projects, obviously we'll need the location of where the site is, how the funding will expand or improve the existing demonstration project. You know, we don't want just like part of like the innovation and impact is like we'd like to fund new things, not just a continuation of what's already happening. And we want an estimation of the number of people who are involved or impacted or provided access to the demonstration site. For research projects, we'd like research questions and hypothesis, research methodology, and a data plan. Obviously, these things can go into a ton of detail, but you know, I trust you to keep it relatively concise. Like I said, any documents in this additional documents category can be provided as attachments and not towards your 10-page limit. If you're doing an outreach project, I want the intended audience, kind of your plan for reaching your intended audience, your materials you're going to develop, and your anticipated number of people you contact or provide access to. If you're doing a combination of these things, if you're creating a demonstration project that also includes an outreach plan, you'll need to provide both sets of additional documents. All right. Chad, I see your question, and I'll get to it in a minute. Right now. Included at the end of the grant guidelines and as numbers in the application are how our evaluation team is going to score your application. So we're hoping to be transparent in how we're scoring things. And each of the categories I just went through has a certain point value assigned. The approach, which includes methodology, construction plan, timeline, and budget, that's the big bulk of the application, and that's worth 25% or 25 points. We are looking for projects that are impactful. That's again the long-term impact of the project on agrivoltaics industry, on agricultural communities, and on our individual farmers and ranchers. That's worth 20 points. We want projects that are innovative. We want projects that support producers. Both of those categories are worth 15 each. The budget is worth 10. That just means your budget is well considered. We think it's realistic. The experience of the applicant is worth 5 points. And then, Chad, I think maybe the 10 points you're missing is this committee discretion project diversity category, which is not in the application because we're kind of going to look at the whole suite of project applications we get and kind of pick projects that are diverse, cover different geographic areas. One, like maybe some project on livestock, maybe some projects on crops, maybe some projects on like how solar arrays are tilted or how high they are. So we want to, you know, kind of spread the money out. So that project diversity is, you can't really capture it in your individual application, but our committee is going to consider it as they look across the suite of projects. All right, Vaughn, I see your question. That's a good question on where you can find previous project research topics and results. This is the first time this Department of Agriculture has funded any agrivoltaics research and demonstration projects. So there isn't a library of things we funded. However, a really good resource is the AgriSolar Clearinghouse, which Cindy, maybe could you Google that and put it in the link, or put a link in the chat? That's run by the National Center of Appropriate Technology. National Center of Appropriate Technology. They run this thing called the Agrivoltaics Clearinghouse, and they capture all sorts of information, including research that's been done and current demonstration projects. So take a look at that. And then I know NREL here locally, the National Renewable Energy Lab, also has quite the list of projects of research projects that they and others have done. So I appreciate that question. If we can maybe we'll get a link in the chat, and if not, I'll send it to you. I think I have your contact information. There's a question about cost sharing. Great question. We are not requiring any cost match or cost sharing. We do like to see projects that leverage other funds, that have partners and partnerships. But you won't get any bonus points for doing that. So encouraged, but not required. Chad asks about innovation. Is it limited to new technologies in agrivoltaics, or would innovative ways of outreach be included in framing innovation? I think that's a good question. I think we could think about it as innovative ways of outreach, and also hopefully your outreach is illuminating agrivoltaics and kind of some of the new things that are happening in that space. And like I said, all of agrivoltaics is pretty new. So if you're reaching new audiences, that'll count as innovation. If you're doing it a different way, that'll count as innovation, especially if it's about like how your audience could benefit from agrivoltaics. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think that makes sense, both in the way you kind of reach the audience or tell the story, and also focusing on what's new in the space for technology and how it's being utilized and on the land. Cute.
Great. Well, that's the end of my presentation. So I'm happy to take more questions if anyone has any.
Do you envision a venue where results of whoever wins these awards can present their results?
That's a great question, Bill, and I haven't thought that far in advance. But I think it would be great, both so they could learn from each other and inform the community, and as a way to report to the legislature. So I'll put that on my kind of plan list for summer 2024. Sue asks if we anticipate future funding. This is a priority grant project for Department of Agriculture, but it was funded by the legislature. So it'll depend on how the budget shakes out. But we're enthusiastic, and the bill sponsors are enthusiastic. So we hope so, and we hope that this first round of funding can really show the importance of it, and hopefully we'll get a good set of applications that we can say, look at all these projects, we want to fund all of them, please give us more money. So no promises, but it's pretty cool stuff. So of course I think everything I do is cool, so I'm not probably the best spokesperson. It was a bipartisan bill, that included Senator Simpson, Representative McCormick, Representative Soper, and Senator Hansen. So some Senator Simpson's from the San Luis Valley, Senator Hansen and Representative McCormick are from the kind of Front Range Boulder area. And I actually don't know where Representative Soper's from, but
He's from
yeah.
Grand Junction.
Thanks, Tyler. Grand Junction. So we had a good suite of folks across the political aisles and across the state. Vaughn asks about information on solar developers who are more friendly to ag. I don't have a on hand list, but I can ask around for one, or if anyone on this call has a list of folks who are thinking about agrivoltaics. Certainly it's a rarity, which is why this grant is important. Most solar developers, I think, let's focus on the solar, let's get it done, let's pave it underneath or keep it mowed really short, let's put fences around it so no one can access it. So we're really trying to change that mentality with programs like this. So I know Excel works with the Jack Solar Farm here in Longmont, so they've done it. But of course, most of their solar farms are utility scale, huge, but at least they know it exists. Sam put a good comment in there about the AgriSolar Clearinghouse. Again, another good reference for examples of utilities and examples of projects. And here's that link again. So I'll just say at the end of this call, I'll post this webinar and these slides on our website, which looks like this. And I'll put the link in the chat as well. And it has the grant guidelines and the grant application instructions, which are the two documents we talked about today. So yeah, if you'll find all information there, if anybody you know was unable to join the webinar today, please direct them to that website or of course to me, and I'll put my email address in the chat as well. I really appreciate everybody joining us today. I really appreciate my steering committee, several of whom are on the call. And thanks to the state of Colorado for starting this cool program, despite all of its weird quirks. We're going to make it great. Thanks again, everybody, and have a lovely rest of your afternoon.